Welcome to TOCHI Stories. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on post notification because it will mean the whole world to me. Now let's get right into the story. Brace yourself. Zara had never felt more powerful. The image of her standing at the front of Santo's mansion with her rounded belly, flanked by reporters and news crews, flooded every local blog, television broadcast, and social media feed. She basked in the glow of flash photography, gently rubbing her stomach while calling herself the chosen one to carry Santo's legacy. Every time a reporter asked about wedding dates or Santo's involvement, she would smile calmly and say, "He's a private man, but our son connects us eternally." Meanwhile, inside the mansion, Santo could barely stand her presence. He slept in the guest wing and avoided her at every opportunity. Zara, however, moved like a queen who owned the house. She gave instructions to the staff, scheduled family dinners, and claimed the master bedroom, even though Santo had long vacated it. She called Mama Ngozi Mama, posing with her for media photos she secretly arranged. All the while, Mama Ngozi's eyes watched her without joy, full of quiet suspicion. Though her public image thrived, behind the scenes, Zara ruled with manipulation. She made sure that any brand connected to Santo was tied to her name, from his real estate developments to public appearances. If Santo refused to acknowledge her, she would subtly threaten to leak embarrassing things to the media. Mama Ngozi tried reasoning with her son, but Santo simply said, "There's a baby involved. For now, I can't cause another scandal." Zara used the pregnancy as both sword and shield, untouchable and exalted. The market women whispered about how she now rode in Santo's car, wore designer kaftans, and ordered goods without paying, all on credit for Santo's wife. But Mama Ngozi kept her anger quiet, biding her time. She had learned from the past, not every war was won with confrontation. At night, the house was a tomb of tension. Zara would walk past Santo's door, lingering, hoping he would open up and invite her in, but he never did. On social media, she posted pictures of herself with captions like, "We are almost here, Papa S. Jr. Red Heart, Baby Medium Dark Skin Tone," even tagging Santo. Fans congratulated her. Comments flowed like a river, some applauding her courage, others questioning her silence on the wedding. But Zara knew the truth. She didn't need a wedding. The baby was her trophy, her seat at the throne. In the eyes of the world, she had already won. What she didn't know, however, was that a secret she'd buried long ago was stirring again, a secret with a name, a face, and a love that never died. In the dim light of a sparsely furnished apartment, far from the wealth and marble-tiled halls of the Santo mansion, Depo paced restlessly. He was tall, dark-skinned, and powerfully built, with years of hardship etched into his strong features. He had once been Zara's everything, her provider, protector, and lover, until she walked away, chasing the shine of Santo's riches. Now, she was back in his life again, but only in secret and only to shut him out. Depo still remembered the night she showed up at his door, clutching her stomach and whispering, "It's yours. But you must never tell anyone." He had believed her. His eyes welled up with pride and fear. He wanted to raise the child with her, marry her even, and start a modest life. But Zara laughed. "Your life can't afford me. Stay away, or I'll ruin you." Now he watched her on TV from his plastic chair, parading Santo as the father of his child. Rage boiled inside him. He had sacrificed so much for Zara back then, sold his motorcycle, skipped meals, and even dropped out of school just to make sure she had tuition. And she had betrayed him without flinching. Depo clenched his fists. He had respected Santo's wealth when they were younger, even stepped aside when Santo warned him to back off. But this was different. This was his blood, his child. The lie was too loud now, the humiliation too thick. "You're a fool," his best friend had once told him. "Zara doesn't love. She uses." But love had made him blind. Still, a part of him held on, not to Zara, but to the child. The innocent boy who didn't know he was being used as a pawn. When Zara visited that day, dressed in black shades and high heels, Depo thought she might have come to finally do right. But she came only to threaten. "You'll never touch him," she said coldly. "If you try to go public, I'll say you're an obsessed ex trying to ruin my life." And you know the world believes money, not truth. Then she left without waiting for a response. Depo sank into his chair, broken but not beaten. He had kept quiet long enough. But now, with the birth approaching, his heart began to shift. He would not let his son grow up believing a lie. And Somto would soon learn that not all crowns come with glory. Some are forged in deceit and crumble when truth knocks. The past came alive in Depo's memory like an open wound. He had met Zara during their university days, when she was still a struggling girl from a modest home. Her confidence had always been larger than her means. She walked like royalty even when she couldn't afford lunch. Depo had fallen fast. He was studying mechanical engineering, juggling campus hustle, and living on stipends. But every time Zara complained about school fees, he found a way. He pawned his wristwatch, slept on empty stomachs, and borrowed from friends just to see her through. Her dreams became his burden, and he carried it with pride. But the more he gave, the more she wanted. And when Santo entered the picture, wealthy, charming, and bold, Zara drifted. At first, it was subtle. Late replies, excuses, canceled dates. Then came the cruel day she said, "Depo, I can't be poor forever. You're too kind, but kindness doesn't build empires." Depo had begged. He had cried. But Zara had already changed her number. He watched her transform before his eyes, from the girl who once wore thrift gowns and shared noodles with him, into the woman who now dined at five-star hotels. What hurt more was that Santo knew about their history. In fact, Santo had confronted him once at a school event. "She's with me now," Santo had said calmly. "Back off, or I'll make you disappear." And Depo, still humble and shaken, had left without a fight. He tried to move on, dated other women, worked as a technician, saved up. But no one filled the space Zara left behind, not because she was perfect, but because she owed him closure he never got. And now, with a child involved, the old wound became a new fire. The throne Zara sat on was built from his sacrifice, and he would not die forgotten. Depo began compiling evidence, texts, voice notes, bank transfers, even Zara's voice in one recording saying, "It's your child, but I'll never let the world know." He didn't know what he'd do with it yet. Maybe leak it online, maybe confront Somto, maybe take it to court. But what he knew for certain was this: truth had a voice, and he would make sure it was heard. Somto sat at the edge of his bed, his elbows pressed into his knees, his fingers tangled together as he stared into nothing. His mind was far from the plush interior of the room. It was wandering back to the university days, those early, electric moments when he first noticed Zara. She had been loud, flashy, always surrounded by attention seekers and admirers. Yet it was her ambition that caught his eye. He remembered the first day he noticed how Depo looked at her. Depo wasn't rich, but there was a quiet power in his loyalty. He would ride an old bicycle across town just to bring her food and books. Somto didn't pay attention at first, but as Zara began spending more time with him, jealousy brewed. Somto, used to being the man every girl wanted, didn't take it lightly. He remembered summoning Depo to his hostel one rainy evening and issuing a stern warning. "She deserves better than your poverty." Depo had said nothing then. He simply left, drenched, but his eyes told a story of quiet defiance. Back then, Santo thought he had won. Zara came to his house more often, proudly clutching the designer bags he bought her. She laughed louder when she was around him, but it was forced, plastic, a performance. He didn't notice it then because he was blinded by the thrill of ownership. He had taken a girl from a man who had nothing, and that alone made him feel like a king. But over time, cracks appeared. He would catch Zara glancing at her phone and smiling faintly. She became increasingly defensive about her whereabouts. Still, his ego kept him from digging too deep. He was too proud to admit that a woman he thought he had bought over with wealth could still be emotionally tied to a man with nothing. Years passed, and they moved on, or so he thought. But now, with everything unraveling, he began to realize that Zara and Depo's story never truly ended. It simply went underground. That memory haunted him now, as he sat beside Mama Ngozi at breakfast. She looked at him with concern, noticing how his face had aged overnight. "What's on your mind, Santo?" she asked gently, sipping her millet pap. He hesitated before answering. "Mama, what if I was never the man she really loved? What if I was just her escape plan?" Mama Ngozi sighed, setting down her cup. "You're asking the right questions too late, my son. But you still have time to make things right, not with Zara, but with yourself and Adora." The name made his chest tighten. He hadn't spoken to Adora in over a week, but her silence had become louder than Zara's boasting. He had to face his truth, and the ghosts of the past that were slowly crawling back into the light. Adora stood at the entrance of the local women's center, where she volunteered part-time. The sun was mild that day, yet her heart was heavy. She had received another message from Santo, his fourth this week alone, pleading to meet. Against her better judgment, she had agreed. Now, as she sat across from him in a quiet cafe, the atmosphere was both awkward and painful. Somto looked worn down, his eyes sunken, his voice softer than she remembered. "I don't know how else to say it," he began, "but you are the only woman I've ever truly loved." Adora's eyes flickered with emotion, but she didn't let herself soften. "And yet, you slept with another woman. You had a child with her. What kind of love is that, Santo?" He looked away, swallowing hard. "I don't even know how that happened. I swear. That night I was drugged. Set up. I only woke up when you were already running out of the room." She bit her lip. She wanted to believe him. But the image of Zara under the sheets, pretending to be asleep beside him, haunted her still. They talked for nearly an hour. He told her everything he had discovered about Zara. The threats, the strange behavior, the inconsistencies. He didn't hide anything. For the first time, he spoke like a man who was no longer defensive, but broken. Adora listened silently. She didn't interrupt, not once. And when he was done, she simply said, "Santo, I believe that you believe everything you've said. But that doesn't erase what I saw. You were with her, and now there is a baby involved. A lifetime consequence. I can't erase that." Her voice cracked at the end. He reached across the table to hold her hand, but she gently pulled it back. "You don't get to hurt me that deeply and walk back in like nothing happened." He nodded, defeated. "Then just let me be around you, even as a friend. Let me prove who I am again." She didn't respond. She stood up and walked out, tears filling her eyes. Later that evening, Adora sat on her balcony, staring at the sunset. Her younger cousin came out and sat beside her, chewing sugarcane. "Sister, is that not the rich man again?" she asked, pointing at Santo's car slowly driving away. Adora smiled faintly, but said nothing. Inside her heart, a war raged. She missed him, his laughter, his kindness, his mother's warmth. But she feared getting hurt again. She feared that the moment she opened her heart, another wound would be waiting. And with Zara parading the pregnancy, the world would always remind her of that one night, that one betrayal. She whispered to the breeze, "Maybe love isn't enough when scars are this deep." Mama Ngozi walked with a sense of purpose through the narrow streets of a run-down neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. Her wrapper was tightly secured, and her slippers slapped against the dusty path as she followed the address scribbled on a piece of paper. One of the market women, a joke who had family in the area, told her she'd seen the makeup artist living there recently. Mama Ngozi had been restless since she began suspecting Zara's manipulation, and she wouldn't find peace until she unearthed the truth. When she arrived at the address, a little girl pointed her to a single-room apartment with faded green curtains. "That's where Auntie stays," the child said. Mama Ngozi knocked, and after a long pause, the door creaked open. The girl stood there, barely recognizable, thinner, with dark circles under her eyes. She froze when she saw Mama Ngozi. "Madam, please, I wasn't supposed to—" "I didn't," she began, but Mama Ngozi held up her hand. "Sit," Mama Ngozi said firmly, stepping inside. The room was sparse, one mattress on the floor, a fan, and a broken mirror leaning against the wall. The girl sat and began to tremble. "I have no peace since that day," she whispered. "I didn't know it would go this far." Mama Ngozi pressed her. Slowly, the girl revealed everything. Zara had approached her with an offer too good to refuse. money, exposure, makeup gigs from wealthy clients. All she had to do was flirt with Santo and create a scandal. It wasn't supposed to ruin lives, she said with guilt. Then she played Mama Ngozi a recorded voice note, Zara promising her more cash if she made it look real. Mama Ngozi sat in silence, her chest tightening. So much pain. So much deceit. Why are you telling me now? She asked. The girl replied, because the lies don't let me sleep. Back at home, Mama Ngozi played the recording over and over again, pacing the living room. Somto sat in a corner, shocked and quiet. We have proof now, he said. Adora will believe this. But Mama Ngozi shook her head. No, not yet. That baby she carries, that baby is a weapon. And Adora doesn't want war. She wants peace. We have to move carefully. They both looked at the door as Zara walked in, humming and rubbing her belly. Ah, Mama, she said sweetly, I just came from antenatal. Mama Ngozi forced a smile. But behind her back, she held the memory card with the recording. War had begun, and this time she would be the one to end it. Zara stood before the full-length mirror in the master bedroom, gently rubbing her round belly, while posing in various angles for selfies. She turned sideways and smiled. To the world, she was a queen, carrying Santo's heir and controlling the most influential family in the region with a single bump. Interviews rolled in weekly. Her face was plastered on magazine covers, and every gossip blog referred to her as the modern Nigerian Madonna. But behind that glowing facade was a woman spinning webs. Every clinic visit was curated, every press appearance rehearsed. She had even gone as far as hiring a private media consultant to manage her narrative. To her audience, she was a beacon of elegance and transformation. But behind closed doors, she was poisoning the very roots of the family tree she'd forced herself into. Every time Santo ignored her, she made sure the staff reported it. Each time Mama Ngozi rolled her eyes, she filed it away to later spin into victimhood. Zara had been paying the same corrupt doctor for months now. The plan was foolproof. On the day of delivery, he would hand over a doctored DNA result proving Santo was the father. In exchange, she had already transferred enough money to sponsor the man's twin daughters to medical school. She also instructed him to create hospital reports that painted her as vulnerable, at risk of a miscarriage if emotionally stressed. That way, every time someone in the family tried to confront her, she would simply break down into loud sobs, press her hands to her stomach, and whisper, "Please don't hurt the baby." It worked every time. Santo's aunt had almost slapped her once, but backed off the moment Zara stumbled dramatically and held the nearest wall, gasping for air. Even Mama Ngozi, wise and observant, had to tread carefully. The unborn baby became a shield, a spiritual hostage binding the family in guilt. At night, Zara would lie beside Santo, who never touched her. She often stared at his back and wondered if he'd ever truly see her as more than the woman who stole his peace. But she also didn't care much anymore. What mattered was the title. His wife, the mother of his child, the woman the world would never forget. She had convinced herself that love was irrelevant. Power was what lasted. And yet there were cracks. Depo had started sending messages again, threatening to expose her. She responded with warnings laced in manipulation. You'll never see this child. Try it and you'll be behind bars. Still, she feared him. He knew too much. But for now, the baby was her leverage. With each passing day, Zara sank deeper into her illusions, believing she was untouchable, unaware that beneath her throne, the wood was beginning to rot. The charity event was organized by a local foundation that supported widows and abandoned children, and it was Mama Ngozi's idea to invite Adora. She had begged her to come, promising no drama, just a quiet evening to help those in need. Adora reluctantly agreed, wearing a modest sky-blue ankara gown and tying her natural hair in a bun. She didn't expect to see Santo, but when she arrived and saw him handing out gift bags to children with a genuine smile, her chest tightened. He looked tired, leaner, and quieter than before, a man changed by storms. She tried to avoid him, but Mama Ngozi gently nudged them toward each other under the pretense of sorting out donation lists. The air was thick with unspoken words as they sat side by side on a wooden bench under the mango tree behind the hall. Their conversation began hesitantly. She asked how his mother was doing. He asked about her studies. The tension slowly melted as they talked about childhood memories, mutual friends, and how funny life had turned out. Somto laughed, not the loud, boastful laugh of the past, but a quiet, grateful one. Sometimes I wish we could go back to when all we worried about was buying boli and groundnut after school, he said softly. Adora smiled, lowering her gaze. Back then, you never noticed me, she teased. You were too busy chasing everything flashy. He nodded, ashamed but honest. And I lost the one thing that wasn't flashy, but real. They didn't touch, but their hearts leaned toward each other. The silence between them was no longer awkward, it was healing. For the first time since the scandal, Adora saw not the man she ran from, but the boy who once made her laugh when her mother was sick. As the evening ended, Mom and Ngozi approached them and gave Adora a small bag of roasted groundnuts. For old time's sake, she smiled. Adora laughed and accepted it. Somto walked her to the gate, and they stood for a moment under the flickering street lamp. He didn't ask for anything, no second chance, no promises. He simply said, "Thank you for coming." She nodded. "I needed this," she whispered. As she got into the kiki and drove off, her heart felt conflicted. She had built walls around herself to survive, but tonight a small door had opened again. Meanwhile, Zara watched from a distance, unseen but burning with rage. She had seen the subtle smiles, the shared glances, and she knew the woman she mocked was rising again. And that scared her more than anything. Zara's fury exploded the moment Santo walked back into the house. She had waited all night, dressed in a sleek black maternity gown, her hair curled, her lips painted blood red. She sat dramatically in the living room, lights dimmed, ready to seduce him. But when he walked past her without a word, her plan crumbled. "So you're seeing her again," she screamed. "You think I didn't see the photos? You too at the charity event, laughing like old lovers." Santo turned, his eyes cold. "It was none of your business," he said flatly. "She's not the liar carrying a child that may not be mine." Zara's face twitched. She was good at faking tears, but tonight her rage was real. "You think you're smart, Somto. But let me remind you, I carry your heir. That's your legacy in here," she shouted, jabbing her belly with her index finger. "And I'll remind you," he replied calmly, "you may carry a child, but I carry the truth. And I'm tired of hiding it." That night, she called Depo in desperation. Her voice trembled with frustration and fear. "Stay away from me. If you ever show your face again, I swear I'll tell the police you've been harassing me." But Depo was no longer afraid. "Zara, I have pictures, voice notes, everything. You've used me long enough. That child is mine. You can't erase me from his life." She hung up in a panic, pacing the room like a caged animal. The pressure was mounting, from Santo, from Depo, from Mama Ngozi's silence. She realized too late that her lies had grown too large to contain. She had built an empire of deceit, but it was cracking at the seams. Still, she told herself she could hold on until birth. Once the doctor declared Santo the father, everyone would fall back in line. She just needed to make it to that moment. The next morning, Zara began staging scenes again, falling down the stairs accidentally, calling the press to film her hospital visits, crying to social media followers about being neglected by Santo. She trended again for a while. Sympathy poured in. But at home, things were falling apart. Mama Ngozi no longer spoke to her unless necessary. Santo stayed out longer. Even the staff had grown cold. The baby inside her kicked more often, perhaps sensing the war outside. And as her due date approached, she realized her once glorious rise had become a lonely journey. But she still clung to one thought. If she could control the narrative, she could still win. The throne, she believed, was still hers. Little did she know, a storm was already forming, one that would wash away every crown she had forged in lies. The hospital was buzzing with controlled chaos when Zara was wheeled into the delivery ward, screaming with a mix of pain and theatrical exaggeration. Camera crews stood outside the gates, A few were even secretly invited by Zara herself. And Somto stood stiffly beside her, arms crossed, jaw tight. He hadn't touched her belly once, not even during the long wait in the family lounge. Mama Ngozi sat silently, holding her wrapper tightly and praying under her breath. She wasn't praying for Zara, though she was praying for truth. Zara had made her pregnancy into a spectacle, claiming herself to be the royal womb, announcing constantly on social media that she carried the heir to the Okonkwo legacy. Nurses moved around quickly, and amidst the real emergency, Zara's acting skills remained unmatched. She screamed louder than necessary, cried even when contractions hadn't intensified, and gripped Santo's arm when cameras flicked on outside. After hours of labor and dramatics, Zara finally gave birth to a baby boy. As expected, the doctor she had bribed earlier came out with a rehearsed smile and held a sealed envelope. "Congratulations," he said smoothly, looking around for the cameras before turning to Santo. "The DNA confirms you are the father." Mama Ngozi's lips tightened, her eyes never leaving the doctor's face. Something about his voice didn't sit right. Somto stared at the baby, who was now wrapped in a blue blanket, and for a moment his heart stirred, not with love, but confusion. The baby looked nothing like him, but he couldn't place why that unsettled him. Zara, on the other hand, beamed with fake exhaustion, tears glistening on her cheeks. "We did it, my love," she whispered, holding the baby toward him. But Santo didn't respond. Instead, he turned toward his mother, whose hands were now trembling. Just as Santo was handed the birth certificate to sign, a loud commotion broke out at the entrance of the maternity ward. A man's voice boomed across the hallway, demanding to see the child. "That's my son. That baby is mine." It was Depo. He stormed in, ignoring the hospital guards, eyes locked on Zara. The entire hallway froze. Doctors and nurses paused. Cameras tilted to catch the outburst. Depo, panting and visibly angry, pointed at Zara. "Tell them the truth. That's my child. You paid me to keep quiet. You threatened me. But I will not let another man raise my son." Chaos erupted. Journalists shoved each other for footage. Mama Ngozi stood up so quickly her chair screeched backward. Zara's face drained of color. Her carefully orchestrated lie was unraveling at the one moment she needed it to be perfect. And in her eyes, behind the panic and fear, was a single thought. It wasn't supposed to go this way. Zara's hands trembled as she clutched the hospital bed, her eyes wide in terror. "Security," she screamed. "Get this man out of here. He's crazy. He's stalking me." Depo didn't flinch. He held up his phone, displaying voice notes, text messages, even a picture of Zara handing him money. "You lied to this entire family. You planned everything, the setup with a makeup artist, the seduction, the fake pregnancy journey, all so you could trap Santo and destroy Adora. But I was there, before him, Zara. I saw you before you wore all this fake glory. And now you think I'll just disappear again? I won't let you." Santo stood in place, frozen, not by the accusation, but by the clarity in Depo's voice. It wasn't just desperation, it was conviction. Mama Ngozi stepped forward and touched the baby's head. "Let them test again," she said quietly. "Let truth speak." The hospital administrator, caught between viral drama and potential lawsuit, ordered an internal inquiry immediately. The bribed doctor stammered as he was cornered by nurses and hospital security. Under pressure, and knowing the walls were closing in, he confessed. "Yes, I altered the DNA test. She paid me. She said it was to protect her future." A collective gasp echoed down the hallway. Mama Ngozi covered her mouth and wept. Somto stared at the doctor, then at Zara, who now looked like a broken doll, beautiful, but hollow and shaking. He handed the certificate back and tore it in two. "You lied," he said softly. "To all of us." Zara lunged forward, crying uncontrollably. "Somto, please. I love you. I was afraid of losing you. Everything I did for us." But the more she spoke, the louder the silence around her became. It was over. Outside the hospital, the media descended like vultures. News outlets broadcasted the drama instantly. Zara's baby scam exposed. Real father comes forward, trended within hours. Former friends withdrew their support. Brands cut ties. Public sympathy turned into disgust. Depo, though hurt, cradled the child with a strange mix of pain and joy. His name is Damelare, he whispered. Because he's been vindicated. He refused to speak further to the press, and walked away with his son in his arms. Zara was detained briefly for fraud and conspiracy and later released on bail, but her public image had been shredded. Santo didn't even look back as he walked away with his mother. The throne she fought so hard to steal had turned into a pit beneath her. She was no longer the queen, just a woman exposed, broken, and forgotten, wrapped in her own regrets. Somto sat quietly on the edge of his bed, staring into the dimly lit corner of his room, the same room where Zara once laid beside him, whispering manipulative promises of loyalty and legacy. His mind replayed the entire ordeal, from the scandalous kiss with the makeup artist to the supposed DNA results, the pregnancy manipulations, and now this child that wasn't even his. He felt foolish, violated, and deeply ashamed. Mom Ngozi walked in with 2 cups of warm tea, her face heavy with lines of fatigue and sorrow. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "You survived, my son. That's all that matters now," she whispered. But Santo couldn't respond. How could he? The damage was done, to his name, to Adora, and to the family his father once built with pride. He had allowed himself to be manipulated by a woman who only wanted status. And for what? A lie dressed in lace and wrapped in media praise? Back at the hospital, the fallout continued. The hospital board suspended the doctor pending legal investigation. Medical license revoked. He sat in his office, head buried in his palms, weeping not just for himself, but for the irreversible harm done. Zara, meanwhile, was removed from her private ward and quietly discharged to avoid further embarrassment. Her social media accounts were flooded with insults and disbelief. Former fans now called her Queen of Lies. She sat on her bed in a friend's house, holding her phone, shaking uncontrollably. "I was so close," she whispered, "so close to owning everything. But dreams built on deceit don't last." Depo refused to let her near the child. "You will not hurt him the way you hurt me," he warned. "I'll raise him to never need anyone like you." His words pierced her deeper than any headline ever could. And yet, amid the chaos, something shifted. Mom Ngozi invited Adora to the house again. This time, not as a formality, but as a gesture of healing. They sat in the small backyard, Adora holding a plastic cup of Zobo, while the older woman gently explained everything. "He didn't lie to you. He truly didn't know. But we were all blind until now." Adora listened in silence. Her heart still ached not from betrayal, but from all she had endured, the mockery, the public humiliation, and the wound of seeing Somto with Zara on their wedding day. But now, she knew it was never real. All of it had been orchestrated. And though she didn't speak immediately, her eyes softened. Maybe, just maybe, this pain could still give birth to something beautiful. A beginning, perhaps. Not built on lies or stolen thrones, but on truth, forgiveness, and quiet strength. The commotion in the hospital became uncontrollable. Nurses rushed to calm the panic crowd, while Somto remained frozen, staring blankly at the doctor who just stood there helplessly, his white coat a symbol now stained by deceit. Mom Ngozi, though visibly shaken, took a firm step forward and demanded a second DNA test immediately. "This is my family you tried to destroy," she said, her voice cracked with emotion. "You will tell the truth today." The doctor initially tried to stand his ground, murmuring about protocols and confidentiality, but his hands trembled. Then came the hospital director, summoned by security due to the chaos. When he reviewed the CCTV footage and the printed hospital access logs, which confirmed the doctor had met Zara in private multiple times, everything unraveled like a bad stitch. Under pressure from administration, and with growing media presence outside the hospital, the doctor finally broke down and confessed he had forged the test after receiving a hefty bribe from Zara. The confession sent shockwaves through everyone present. Zara screamed, not in pain but in fury, as her entire lie crumbled around her. "They forced me," she shouted. "I didn't do anything wrong." But no one believed her anymore. The nurses, who had once admired her elegance, avoided eye contact, and the hospital staff kept their distance. The director of the hospital, furious at the public humiliation brought upon the institution, immediately suspended the doctor and placed him under arrest pending full investigation. News vans had already begun lining the front of the building as the story leaked to the press. "Fake DNA result exposes billionaire's fiancé as liar," the headlines read within hours. Mom Ngozi slumped into a wheelchair as Somto held her hand tightly, trying to keep her calm. The damage was irreparable, but for once, the truth had been dragged into the light, and with it came the storm that would destroy Zara's carefully constructed throne of lies. Outside, the media had a field day. Reporters shouted Somto's name. Cameras flashed as Zara was escorted into a side room for questioning, and hospital security struggled to keep the peace. Depo, holding the baby, watched it all with a calm sadness. He was not happy Zara had been exposed. He was relieved. For too long, he had been used as a disposable shadow in her game, the real father buried beneath a glossy image of wealth and lies. Now, with the truth revealed, his voice could finally be heard. "I don't want fame," he told the cameras that gathered around him. "I just want to raise my son, free from lies." And though the reporters pressed for more details, he walked away, cradling the baby close to his chest like a quiet declaration of victory. The world turned on Zara within hours. Her image, once polished and envied, was dragged through the mud of every news outlet and blog in the country. Sponsors pulled out of endorsement deals. Event organizers erased her from upcoming guest lists, and fashion brands issued statements cutting ties with her. Her social media platforms, once flooded with admiration, were now graveyards of insults, backlash, and disappointment. "You lied about a child," one comment read. "Your greed ruined lives," another declared. Videos surfaced of her earlier interviews bragging about being the womb of Santo's future, and they were reposted with mocking captions. Zara locked herself in a small rented apartment on the outskirts of town, unable to face the world. Her mental health deteriorated quickly. Without her former lifestyle, her friends disappeared, and her phone, once full of opportunities, now echoed with silence. Depression crept in like a thief, stealing her sense of identity and dragging her into a dark place she hadn't imagined she'd ever visit. Depo officially took full custody of the baby through a swift legal process, aided by Mom Ngozi's legal team, who offered support without asking anything in return. Santo signed off on the documents and handed the child over personally, eyes filled with a bittersweet mix of anger and relief. "He deserves a real father," Santo said quietly. Depo, though not rich, swore to raise his son with integrity. "Your name won't be borrowed again," he whispered to the infant one evening as they left town to start anew. Mama Ngozi visited them before they left and handed Depo a small gift box. Inside was a gold wristband from her late husband, inscribed with honor in truth. She said, "You're not perfect, but you chose truth over comfort." Depo, overwhelmed, could only nod with tears in his eyes. Meanwhile, Santo and his family withdrew from the public eye. The humiliation was heavy, especially on Mama Ngozi, who had tried her best to protect her son and preserve their name. The market women who had once whispered rumors behind her back now greeted her with respect, understanding the pain she had endured. But the wound between Santo and Adora remained. He had been part of a lie, even if unknowingly. He spent long hours alone, writing in journals, helping at his mother's fruit stall without complaint, and rejecting any public interviews. "I don't want to explain anything anymore," he told his mother one morning. "I just want to earn peace." And peace, it seemed, would require rebuilding not just trust, but a whole new life from the ground up. Time passed, but the memories remained. It was on a quiet Sunday morning, during a charity walk in town, that Santo and Adora met again. Neither expected to see the other, yet there they stood, across the same walkway where once they had planned their wedding. The awkwardness was undeniable, but the silence between them was no longer filled with bitterness, only reflection. Adora looked healthier, wiser, and calmer. Santo walked toward her slowly, unsure if he should speak. You look well, he said quietly. She smiled faintly, the sadness in her eyes still faintly present. You too, she replied. For a moment, they just stood there, the noise of the charity crowd buzzing around them like distant waves. I've been writing letters to you, Santo finally said. But I never sent them. I didn't know if I had the right. Adora nodded. I heard the full story. From your mother. From the hospital. From the papers. But that doesn't erase what I went through. He lowered his gaze, nodding in shame. I know, he whispered. But if I could, I want to learn how to love you again. The right way this time. Without pride. Without shadows. Adora looked at him, and for a long while, said nothing. Then she took a deep breath. Then we start as strangers. No promises. Just one step at a time. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. It was the cautious opening of a door long locked. They walked side by side, talking about everything except the past. Small things. Quiet laughs. Gentle silences. And it was in those moments that healing began, not through grand gestures or dramatic apologies, but through humility, truth, and a shared willingness to begin again, brick by brick. Later that week, Mom Ngozi invited Adora to her market stall. They sat under a shade while peeling oranges, and the older woman finally apologized fully. I should have screamed louder, she said, her voice breaking. I knew something was wrong, but I let that pregnancy blind me. Forgive me. Adora held her hand gently and smiled. You were just trying to protect your son. And so was I. That moment felt like a closing chapter. They hugged tightly, with the market women around them clapping and ululating softly, like a quiet celebration. Mama Ngozi wiped her eyes and whispered, You called me Mama once. I pray you call me that again, someday. Adora didn't answer, but she didn't let go of her hand either. For the first time in a long time, things finally felt possible again. The scent of ripe mangoes filled the air as Mama Ngozi walked through the market, where her story had begun. Her wrapper was faded but clean, and her eyes carried the weariness of a woman who had fought many battles in silence. Whispers followed her everywhere, not in shame, but in respect. She was the woman who had raised a son who nearly lost everything, yet stood tall to reclaim his name. She greeted the women she'd known for years, those who'd seen her hawk oranges in the rain and still returned the next day with a stronger spirit. Now, her steps led her to the small canteen near the junction, the one where Adora now volunteered to feed the poor. She watched from afar, her chest rising and falling as if carrying years of pain, pride, and longing. When she finally walked closer and their eyes met, Mama Ngozi dropped her basket and whispered, "NWM." Adora froze for a moment. She hadn't seen Mama Ngozi since the revelation at the hospital, and 1,000 emotions flooded her chest. She had hated this woman once, not truly, but as an extension of her pain. She had blamed her for standing by silently while Zara nearly destroyed her life. But now, standing before her was not just a woman, it was a mother who had wept, who had almost lost her son, and who had quietly fought behind the scenes to uncover the truth. Without a word, Adora stepped forward, tears rolling down her cheeks, and embraced Mama Ngozi. "I wanted to hate you," she said, voice breaking. "But I see now you never stopped fighting for your son, and for me." The other women in the market clapped silently, wiping their eyes as they watched the reconciliation. It was a reunion written not by perfect words, but by wounded hearts finally healing. They sat together on the old bench under the giant tree, where Mama Ngozi told stories to children for years. This time, the story was her own. She spoke of patience, of watching lies unravel slowly, of hiding pain behind smiles, of fighting wars with wisdom, not weapons. This world, she said, has a way of lifting truth like the morning sun, no matter how long the night stays. Adora listened, her heart softening, as Mama Ngozi continued, "You called me Mama once. I didn't deserve it then, but if your heart allows it, I would wear that name with honor again." Adora nodded, her lips trembling. "I never stopped seeing you as a mother," she replied, "even when I was broken." And with that, the wound between them sealed. For the first time in months, peace returned not just to the family, but to the soul of the woman who once sold fruits in the sun and carried generations on her shoulders. In a quiet neighborhood far from the chaos of city lights, Depo rocked his son gently to sleep. The child was beautiful, dark skin, round cheeks, and eyes that stared up at him like tiny lanterns of hope. He named him Damaler, the one who has been vindicated. The name wasn't just symbolic, it was truth woven into flesh. Every time Depo looked at his son, he saw both a wound and a healing. He had once begged to be acknowledged, silenced by money, threats, and public shame. He had held back while another man was praised for carrying a child that wasn't his. But no more. The truth had finally broken through Zara's glass castle, and he was free to claim what had always been his. He had no wealth to offer, no mansion to raise the boy in, but he had something money could never buy: the pride of fatherhood, the joy of honesty, and the fire of being finally heard. Every day, Depo would wake before dawn, prepare pap, and sing to the baby, songs his own mother used to hum when he was young. Neighbors often watched and smiled. Some whispered about how he'd been humiliated and used, but most now admired his courage. He had walked into a hospital full of cameras and exposed the lie that held a wealthy family hostage. He had faced Santo, not with envy anymore, but with justice. He had told the world that love doesn't grow in stolen gardens, and a child is not a weapon to win war. When people asked if he hated Zara, he would sigh. "I don't hate her," he often said. "I pity her. She forgot that lies may win today, but truth always owns tomorrow." He had already filed for full legal custody and won, given that Zara was declared mentally unfit for now due to depression and dishonesty. Still, at night, Depo sometimes sat with a child in his arms and thought of what could have been. He once dreamed of marrying Zara, of building a small business together, of proving that love could bloom in poverty. But she had chosen a man with a bigger bank account and a fancier name. What she didn't know was that she had also walked away from the only person who would have loved her forever. He looked down at the child and whispered, "You will not grow up hating anyone, not even your mother. But I will raise you to see the value in truth, in loyalty, and in kindness." And with that vow, Depo rewrote the ending of his own heartbreak. No longer the forgotten lover. Now the father with dignity, and a heart that, though once broken, would never be betrayed again. The chapel was small, nothing like the grand hall where their first wedding was supposed to take place. This time, there were no red carpets, no dramatic decor, no fancy camera crews. Just white lilies, a few close friends, Mom Ngozi's tears of joy, and a sky that had finally stopped weeping. Somto stood at the altar in a simple white native outfit, waiting. He had waited long enough, through scandal, disgrace, and deep introspection. His eyes glistened, not with the pride of a rich man, but with the humility of one who had lost and found himself again. When Adora finally walked in, clad in an elegant but simple gown, the whole room stood in silence. Her smile was not wide, but it was real. She carried no bitterness, only a heart that had healed through fire. The ceremony was brief but sacred. When it came time for vows, Santo took a deep breath and faced her. "I failed you once, not because I didn't love you, but because I didn't protect that love. But I've learned that real love is not loud. It's quiet, it's patient, and it never plays with fire to prove its worth. Today, I don't just take your hand. I take every scar, every tear, and I promise to walk beside you with gentleness forever." Adora's eyes welled with tears as she replied, "I don't need a perfect man. I just need a man who sees me, who chooses me, and who never lets lies speak louder than love. And today I choose you too." The market women cheered softly. Mama Ngozi clapped, wiping her eyes with her wrapper. Outside the chapel, children ran with bubbles, and old women sang. It wasn't a loud celebration, but it was sacred. It was a reminder that beginnings don't always have to be grand. They just have to be real. Adora and Santo held hands as they walked past their guests, no longer chained by the past. They had been broken, lied to, mocked, and nearly destroyed, but love had prevailed. As they reached the gate, Mom Ngozi held both their hands and whispered, "You've built this love in fire. May it never burn again." Adora smiled. Somto nodded, and as the sun broke through the clouds above them, they knew. This time, they were not starting over. They were finally starting right. The room was dark. Not because there was no light, but because Zara hadn't turned any on for days. The small apartment she now lived in was a far cry from the luxurious mansion she once paraded through with heels clicking and cameras flashing. Her once bright wardrobe now hung unused, her makeup kits packed in dusty boxes. She sat on the cold tiled floor, back pressed against the wall, with her phone in hand. The screen was cracked, just like her reputation. Every ping from the phone brought a new article, a new meme, a new ridicule. The woman who faked a throne. From queen to nothing. The greatest pretender in Lagos. She was a global joke, a symbol of desperation gone wild. Zara no longer wept. Her tears had dried into silence. All she did now was stare at the same picture. Santo, holding a baby that was never his, looking down in confusion the day Depo stormed into the hospital. Sometimes, in her loneliest moments, she would replay the past like a cruel film. The day she plotted the fake kiss in the bridal suite. The day she paid off the makeup artist. The months of pretending to be the perfect mother-in-law's dream. The night she paid the doctor to lie. The calls she ignored from Depo when he begged to be acknowledged. She had orchestrated everything. Each manipulation, each lie, with precision. And for a while, she wore the crown. She was the woman who destroyed a wedding, divided a family, and inserted herself where she never truly belonged. But now she was nothing. Even her own family had cut her off, ashamed of the disgrace she had brought upon their name. Her sponsors, brand deals, and beauty endorsements were gone. The influencers she once mentored no longer picked her calls. Even the tabloids had moved on. She was a scandal past its expiry. One day, she gathered enough strength to step outside. She wore a plain scarf and old slippers. Nobody noticed her anymore. She passed the old street where she once drove past with tinted glass and a fake smile. Now, her smile had no place. She walked to a corner shop and bought bread, just one loaf. As she turned to leave, a group of girls giggled behind her. One whispered, "Is that not Zara?" Another said, "No, Zara would never look that miserable." Zara didn't turn around. She just walked slower than before. When she got home, she collapsed on her bed and stared at the ceiling. Her mind wandered to the baby she birthed, but never held again. Depo had taken custody. She had no strength to fight. And perhaps deep down, she knew he was the better parent. She reached for her journal, opened to the last page, and scribbled one line. "They laughed with me when I wore gold, but now I wear silence." And that silence would remain. Under the same mango tree where everything began, Somto and Adora now sat, not as broken lovers trying to piece the past together, but as healed partners who had faced their darkest storms and still chosen love. Their two young children played on the sand nearby, giggling and tumbling over each other, while Mama Ngozi told them stories. Her voice was strong again, full of life. Her laughter echoed through the compound like wind rustling old joy back to the surface. Adora leaned into Somto's shoulder, her head wrapped in a simple scarf, her hands resting on her rounded belly. Baby number 3 on the way. Santo looked down at her and smiled, a smile no longer clouded by regret, but shaped by lessons learned. He had lost Adora once. He had nearly lost himself. But this was peace. This was what truth, pain, and repentance had purchased. As Mama Ngozi clapped her hands and shouted "Once upon a time," the children screamed, "Time! Time!" and huddled close to her feet. "There was a woman," she began, "who wore a beautiful crown, but she stole it. And when you steal a crown, you may sit on the throne for a while, but your head will never rest." Adora glanced at Santo. They both knew she was telling the story of Zara. It had become folklore in the market, in the town. A cautionary tale. Not of cruelty alone, but of envy, of lies, and of the emptiness that comes with wanting to possess what was never yours. She thought beauty could buy love, Mama Ngozi continued, but love cannot be bought. And so, the throne she stole began to burn her head, until one day it fell off, and the world remembered who the real queen was. The children clapped, not truly understanding, but their laughter was enough. The past no longer had power here. Somewhere far away, Zara sat alone. No one remembered her birthday. No one called her influencer or fiancé anymore. The throne she had taken with lies and deceit had dissolved into dust. But under this mango tree, Santo and Adora sat with peace, earned, fought for, and cherished. When the sun began to set, Mama Ngozi stood, stretched her back, and whispered, "Let's go inside. We still have food left from the wedding cake." Adora smiled. Wedding cake that finally got eaten. They all laughed and walked in slowly. The last to leave the tree, Somto turned back and looked at it one more time. The place he once promised a girl the world and almost lost it all. Now he had it again, not the world, but the one who made the world feel like home. He whispered softly, "Thank you," and followed his family inside. And in that quiet twilight, the throne was no longer stolen. It had finally returned to the one it belonged to. Thank you for watching this video. What did you learn from this story? Drop it in the comments. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel TOCHI Stories for more.